In this video from New Zealand, I'm driving a 1990 Range Rover Vogue SE, all of the luxury. So from this beautiful spot we can take in the Range Rover styling. And it's quite incredible to think that the Range Rover was 20 years old when this example was made. It is the top of the range Vogue SE. It has the 3.9 litre Rover V8 engine, producing about 190 brake horsepower. It has automatic transmission, but it still has pretty much the same sort of styling, but was nailed by a combination of spanking and David Bache, if that's how you pronounce it, the Rover stylist. Spanking, the superb engineer, came up with the concept of the Range Rover. We'll go around the other side where we might actually see it. Strong sunlight today. David Bache just did a few detail changes, like tail lights, which have actually changed again since 1970 with the addition of fog light area. You can see it's got a split tailgate. It is a practical hatchback, estate type thing. When it came to market, really they didn't know what they were actually making. It came up with a concept before having any known market. You just would not get a car designed like this today. You can see it's very sort of square rig style, a huge glass area, floating roof design with these vinyl pillars. That was a fairly early production change in the early 70s to change to vinyl, give it a full floating roof. Originally a two-door estate. The five-door version came along in the early 80s. Bizarrely, Monteverdi built the first sort of five-door Range Rover, and then Land Rover itself decided, oh, maybe that's a good idea. I mean, it's quite remarkable really. The whole concept of a super luxury 4x4 was not Land Rover's work. There were companies in the 1970s throughout Great Britain taking the Range Rover and making superb, stupendous luxury versions, often for the Saudi Arabian market. We'll see it's got the later slatted grille. I'm sorry about the cars driving past, it's hard to find a quiet spot here. So it's got this slatted grille. The original had vertical grills. This was a 1980s facelift, as was the addition of this chin spoiler, which sadly is rather prone to getting damaged if you do any off-roading, but has aerodynamic benefits. We can have a peek underneath, of course, where we see the Range Rover's secret. It's beam axles suspended on almighty coil springs. So beam axles, permanent four-wheel drive. Beam axles, very old-fashioned really, phased out on most passenger cars in the 1940s. But the benefit is very strong, very sturdy, very good for off-roading. So from concept, the Range Rover had permanent four-wheel drive. So all four wheels are permanently driven with a differential lock to lock the center differential and provide more traction. That ensures drive is equally split at all times between the front and rear axle. What the Range Rover always needed was limited slip rear diff really, but that's getting into areas we probably shouldn't bother going into all that much. But these later Range Rovers finally made it to the American market. They were denied to Americans for a long time, but they finally managed to make a federalized version in the early 1990s. Good grief, it is windy. So windy, I'm just going to quickly show you these marvelous captain seats, complete with armrest. Slight bit of damage here. And I'm going to jump aboard to get out of the wind. Oh, now the damage is justified on this example, I feel, on the seats, by the fact it's done 294,000 kilometers. It is not what you'd call in the first flush of youth. So it is getting on a bit. It always amused me that for a luxury vehicle, the interior of the Range Rover is really very agricultural and quite old-fashioned in many ways. The dashboard seems to be properly piecemeal, something they didn't sort out until 1993 with the last of the Range Rover Classics, as it was then badged, which had the soft dash, far improved. You know, there's air conditioning, which sadly doesn't work on this example, but it's kind of a bolt-on to the original rather complicated heating. So I think that one is probably for face level vents. That's the aircon setting. We're just being hopeful. We're just hoping it's going to work. Hot and cold, and fan speed up and down. Yeah, that's how it goes. We've got the gear selector here. Well, that one's for the automatic transmission, which I think is a ZF unit, 4 speeds. And this is your range selector. So you'd use high range gears for going down the road, use your low range gears for going very slowly over rough terrain. No diff lock, and that's because this era of Range Rover has a viscous centre diff. So ignore what I said about the locking diff. I completely forgot that, and I should have known that because I've had a 1990 Range Rover which had the viscous diff, and in many ways the viscous diff is a lot better because if it detects either the front or rear prop shaft spinning far more quickly than the other, it locks. So it gives you that locking diff feel only when you need it. So the rest of the time the axles are free to be independent, because of course, especially if you're doing tight twists, the terrain will put strain on the axles if they're not able to move at different speeds. So we've got the all-important transfer gearbox information there. We've got a little bank of switch gear down here. That's from some additional main beam lights. I don't think it has, unless those are the fog lights wired up to that. Maybe they are, but then there's a fog light switch there. No rear fog light switch because they're not mandated in this market. We've got interior light there, and there we go, slightly sagging headliner, standard. Heated rear window, oh sorry, heated front window and heated rear window. You won't be able to see, but it has actually got Ford's quick clear heated windscreen system fitted, which is interesting because I didn't think Ford let anyone else use that technology. So there you go. The stalks, very similar to Austin Rover Maestro and Montego stalks. In fact, that stalk is absolutely identical. The only slight difference is that the light switch is this cheap and nasty little toggle switch rather than the switch on the stalk. I don't know if these light up. They did on Maestros and Montegos for a time. Got a rear wiper switch down here as well. All a bit flimsy. I mean, all a bit standard. This was a luxury vehicle. Got old hazard flasher. And yeah, a full dashboard of lights when you turn things on. Just hear the fan roaring into life. So far so good. Got little plasticky pulls to shut the doors. The wood I don't think is in too bad nick for one of these, but again it is all a bit piecemeal. Here are the electric window switches, front and rear. A quite nice logical layout really. Electric seat adjusters as well, and they still seem to work. A box full of all of the things, various devices in there. Ah, that's a converter. So you can use UK towing on the New Zealand towing setup. There's a Pioneer manual there for the blingy non-standard stereo, and that's my little charge point. I apologise for that. But what I forgot is how high you sit up. So my head is quite level with the top of the windscreen. It's fine, there's plenty of headroom, but you get this commanding view of the road and of Holdens driving past. So it's a very commanding position. Look at the depth of the windows, huge, so visibility is truly excellent. Let's hop into the back. So here in the rear, a fair amount of space, not the most. It's a bit tight on legroom. The Range Rover runs only on a 100-inch wheelbase. They created later on, right at the end of production, the Range Rover LSE, which had a long wheelbase, 108 inches I think. And that was actually to test the running gear of the P38. The P38 also ran on that longer chassis. Very clever. But I've got all the armrests. I've got an extra armrest at the side of my seat, as well as the centre one down here. Plenty of headroom and a pretty good view of the road ahead. Such is the gap between the two seats. So yeah, pretty good visibility really. Again, light and airy, and then the boot is beyond. So let's go and have a look at the boot. One thing I will point out is these frames rot horribly in the UK. In New Zealand, they merely lose their paint, it would seem. You'll note the rear wiper is actually tucked up here at the top. An interesting design because it just sort of folds up a bit as the hatch opens. That doesn't seem the neatest design, but there we go, that's stage one. Earlier Range Rovers had an external lever here, and in fact on the earliest ones the number plate would hinge down, so if I reach in here and drop the tailgate, you could drop your number plate and it would still be visible as you were driving along. Generally they prefer you don't bother doing such things. Now, one problem I have with this layout, I mean, this is all well and good for your sitting and having a picnic. Sorry, knees alert. It's absolutely ideal for that, and you get a bit of rain shelter as well. Important for the UK. But it does make reaching the back of the boot area quite difficult. That's as far as I can comfortably reach. So if I want to get that green thing, I've kind of got to clamber onto the tailgate to reach in and reach it. Spare wheel quite neatly stowed here. Not sure how you get it out. Oh, that bit moves, that's fine. So it's all a bit flimsy, but it's all still in fairly good shape considering the age of the vehicle. So up goes that, and then down goes that, and that's our station wagon. Here you go, I won't call it understate, I'll call it a station wagon. Ready to go. It's got a typical Range Rover beefy tow bar. Yeah, you kind of need your tow bar really. They are excellent towing vehicles, I can confirm that, having owned one myself, though this tow bar does end up acting rather like a plough if you're off-roading, and it scrapes and pulls along and generally isn't ideal. Oh, I will just say, this isn't standard panel gap even for a Land Rover. That's because we think at some point some idiot has trodden on this panel here and it's rather kinked it, so the fit isn't very good, which is a shame. They probably stood on it trying to access the roof, because trying to clean one of these cars and clean the roof area actually pretty difficult. But we should probably have a look at the heart of the beast, so let's get the bonnet open. A clever person would edit this footage out. Only 2 pedals because automatic. Let's see if I can remember where the bonnet release is. No, apparently I can't. There we go. And springs lift the huge aluminium bonnet mostly out of the way. So here we go, here is the 3.9 litre V8 engine, that classic 60s ex-Buick engine, tweaked a bit to 190 brake horsepower by this stage, and with a fairly vast amount of torque. I'll put that up because I've no idea what it is off the top of my head. There's the air filter assembly, huge alternator, massive screen wash bottle, but it's all so accessible. No plastic covers here. What you see is really what you get. And performance ignition leads, so that should add 20 brake horsepower. Right, here we go. Let's fire up the engine. And even as it idles, it sounds magnificent. Love the way the whole car rocks. So soft is the suspension, but the whole car rocks, which this is probably cancelling out thanks to its image stabilisation as you rev the engine. Oh, I'm just going to pull you back out the holder again for a better view of the wipers. We better give the wipers a test, otherwise this wouldn't be a hub nut test. There we go. Oh no, we have got a triangle of doom going on here, but I think you could probably adjust that wiper up. I did on mine, I remember well. And similarly, you could adjust the wipers up slightly and they come a bit closer to the edge of the windscreen. I've got the handbrake off because I'm lazy. Transmission brake on these, so it's a big drum on one of the prop shafts, but oh, clunk. Yeah, it's showing its wear a little bit there with the clunking. You get wear, I think it's a chain drive down to the transfer box, so you can get wear going on. So it does clonk and groan a little, but mostly it just makes lovely V8 noises. But you sit so high up, it's like driving around in a house. But because the suspension's so soft, you do move around a lot, so it takes a little getting used to. It's like standing up in a Citroen 2CV. And there's no anti-roll bars, so these Range Rovers do roll around. They did later fit them, but they didn't really want to fit them because they were worried they would compromise off-road ability. I don't think this fuel I put in it is going to last very long, to be honest. But the V8 engine gives it reasonable, if not hilarious, performance, but there's loads of torque, so it does pull very effortlessly, even going uphill like this. Oh, cattle grid? We might have noticed that in a lesser car. I do find the mirror gets in my way, but you can look above it as well as below it due to its position. Hairpin. No fireworks. Gosh, some stunning terrain up here as we climb Temata. Wow, the views are increasing. As is the traffic level. Big old steering wheel as well, and it's recirculating ball steering. I think it's certainly a steering box, so it's not really the most direct, and power assisted as well, so you don't get much of a feel of what's going on, but nonetheless you can actually hustle a Range Rover fairly quickly when you can actually see what's coming round the bends. Go. We have made it to the top. I'll just do a bit of a demo. If I put it into low, I think that's gone into low. No, that's into low. And so I put her in low first. That is as fast as she goes. So what that does is give you much more control when going over slow terrain. So we're still just ticking over, we're barely moving, and that's what low first does for you. That brings us right to the very, very top. And demonstrate the turning circle, which isn't too bad, I don't think, for a huge four-wheel drive. And we'll go back down. But I could leave it in low all the way down, and I'll get a darn sight more engine braking as a result, I think. So let's hold her in low third. Now I would love to do an off-road video in one of these, but problem is Range Rovers are getting so rare now that who wants to go and put one through the rigours of off-roading? But I did have massive fun in mine. I took it down Strata, Florida, through the famous bomb hole. They really are very capable vehicles indeed, because the suspension is so soft, and what really amazes is how comfortable they are when you're off-roading. You can go over all sorts of rocky terrain and they just feel good. Right then, 0 to 60. $100 or 62 miles an hour. Yeah. There's 2 tons to haul along here, so they're not rapid machines. They're brisk enough, they've got a good overtaking punch, but yeah, these are not race cars by any stretch of the imagination. Fair bit of wind noise going on today, but then there is a fair bit of wind, to be fair. You definitely feel the body rolling and how high we're sitting when you come to bends, but they're very grippy. Given its simple beam axles, the Range Rover behaves very well at speeds. It feels very composed and comfortable. Lack of cruise control is perhaps a surprise, but yeah, I guess you can't have everything, even on a luxury vehicle. But that was the Range Rover's ultimate calling. It was as luxurious transport. Mike Rutherford from Genesis was a huge Range Rover fan, even though he reports that they quite often broke on him. I refuse to confirm or deny whether the song Fading Lights was written about a Range Rover, but if you see Mike Rutherford, you could always ask him whether it was. But yeah, cruising speeds, she's pretty peaceful, even at almost 300,000 kilometers. The colour, by the way, is Trocadero Red, and it is definitely one of the better colours for a Range Rover. So there you go, that was the Range Rover Vogue SE, one of the later ones, 1990. I think a good year for them. I think with a 3.9 litre engine, just gives them that extra bit of grunt, and they're still very capable off-roaders. I can speak from personal experience, just maybe take the chin spoiler off first. But amazing cars. I still think they look absolutely fantastic, despite the huge chunky panel gaps, all very much part of the appeal. It's one of those designs that just got better and better as it aged, I think. So I shall say thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and I shall see you in a future video. Farewell. In this video from New Zealand, I'm driving a 1990 Rover